Thank you, Sanjay. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next morning keynote speaker, Dave Pickles. Dave is the CTO and co-founder of The Trade Desk. As many of you know, The Trade Desk is second only to Google in terms of online ad serving, a remarkably successful company in an incredibly competitive market. Dave is truly an advertising technology veteran with an amazing amount of experience to share with you all today. Dave's remarks today will be focused on a very important topic that's been in the news recently, which is how do you build customer trust while enabling personalization technologies. And I'm sure you will enjoy what Dave has to share with you all. So with that, Dave, take it away.
Hi, okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about consumer trust, about privacy, and a whole lot about big data and the implications of all of the changes that are happening out there on all kinds of businesses. I'll come at it from the point of view of ad tech, because that's what I know about, but I think a lot of this applies to lots of different kinds of businesses. So building consumer trust and personalization 2021 and beyond. So quick introduction to The Trade Desk. So The Trade Desk is a SaaS technology platform that media buyers use to buy media in a data-driven way in real time. It started out as display ads, but then quickly grew into any kind of media you can imagine, whether that's video ads, audio ads, digital out of home, and then increasingly connected television is a huge focus for us. A lot of what we've done has felt like practice for the big show, which is all of television moving into our space, into programmatic. I founded the company with Jeff Green in 2009. We've got more than 1,500 employees in 23 offices, most of which unfortunately are not occupied because of the pandemic. That's another story. We founded our company just on the vision that the funding of media is an important part of media being available and being a good user experience for people to consume. So, if you were trying to watch a show and loaded down with tons of ads, nobody likes that. But if you get a few ads and they're relevant to you and that pays for your content so you don't have to pay for it, that's a great thing. And that goes for all kinds of media, whether it's journalism, which is obviously very important, or if it's the golden age of television. All of that media needs to get paid for. And we wanted to get really good at figuring out the right ad to put in front of the right person at the right time in order to generate a great result for an advertiser without having to load down that experience with tons of ads. That's basically what we do. We look at well beyond 10 million ads every second, 10 million ad opportunities every second. For a sense of scale, if you wanted to fill a $100,000 budget in a month, I might need to buy you like 20 of the 10 million. And so, it's a very interesting big data challenge to get from this giant universe of possibility to the few things that we're actually going to go do. 2020 has been a weird year. we've all been through it. I'm very grateful that Trade Desk was already a very remote, capable company. We were a distributed company since 2010 and a distributed engineering team since 2011. So this year we've been able to do really well. We've been able to execute, and that's been important given the kinds of changes that are happening. There's all this stuff with cookies, but then also over the last 5 years, we've been very focused on the transition from linear TV to connected television. But the pandemic accelerated that massively in a couple of ways. It made it so there's been a huge uptick in viewership and demand for new content because everyone was kind of stuck at home. That has lasted beyond the lockouts. Like that's just a thing now. And then there's also increased cost sensitivity that shifts demand away from things like cable and subscription services towards advertising funded services. The subscription fatigue is very real at this point. And those two things have come together, basically in our strategy to go heavy into CTV, while of course maintaining all the rest of our omni-channel platform, because having a view across all of the possibilities is what allows us to be the most effective. An advertising dollar can be put to work in mobile web, it can be an app, it can be on a billboard on digital out of home, it can be in connected television. And what's the right thing for the consumer to do? If you have a holistic view across everything, you can do a much better job of making those decisions. Yeah, so another way to look at that is like a trillion plus queries a day. It's like 100 times the volume of search globally. And, search seems like a big data problem at first, but that's just one website that you're searching on versus we look across all of the internet, which is very, very big. The internet's a huge place and it's full of diversity and it's full of opportunities. And so, we have some unique challenges that we've had to overcome over the years. Aerospike's been a huge part of that. We've been an Aerospike customer for more than 10 years. We run some of the largest clusters in the world, although I don't think the largest anymore. There's a couple of really impressive ones out there. And it's been just a great partnership, great communication, and a lot of collaboration that I suspect a lot of their other customers have as well. Aerospike's a good company like that. So what's changing with cookie deprecation? It's kind of the big news for anyone who's doing anything on the internet, which is most business at this point. So, it affects different people in different ways. When Apple started this and they made the change in Safari, it wasn't that big of a deal. So if you take mobile web, which is one of those many, many places that you can put an ad dollar to work, and you make it a little harder to target and tell what's going on there, it doesn't make a big difference. And a marketer might say, hey, I'm just going to pull back from that. I'm just going to put the money elsewhere. Or they may say, look, I'm getting these results with this strategy in Chrome. I'm going to just assume it's kind of the same in Safari. I'm going to keep spending with a similar, sort of profile. Wasn't a big deal. When Chrome made the change, it's a little bit of a bigger deal. It's still not, everything. There's no cookies in connected TV. There's no cookies in digital out of home. So it still isn't. It isn't the whole thing, but it's a big enough piece now where it's time, I think, for all of us to really respond to it. When this announcement came out, I quickly came to the conclusion, relatively quickly, that the ultimate result of this is going to be an internet where you have to log into more websites. And the way that I got there is that we did a bunch of analysis on what the CPM would be that we could pay a publisher based on targeting with something like a Flock or with Turtle Dove or with all these different projects that were floated as solutions. And what we saw, what I continue to see, is that CPMs would be much, much lower in any of those environments if that was the only thing that we did. If we said all we do is target based on this new thing that's got less specificity built into it than there used to be before, then there's more waste in the campaign. The less precise you are with targeting, the more waste there is. And then to get the same result for the advertiser, the CPMs are just going to come down. And I think the inevitable reaction to that for a premium content producer is to put up a wall of some kind, at least for part of their content. And so that made me really kind of worry about the future of the internet for a couple of reasons. One is I don't want to have to log in separately to every website. I don't want every website to send me spam. That seems like a downgrade. It just seemed like we're breaking the whole internet in a way in order to get this sort of extreme position on privacy. So what I set out trying to think through is how do we build a better foundation for the open internet? And of course, Google's going to do whatever they do. Facebook's going to do whatever they do. That's a very different ballgame from the hundreds of thousands of other content providers out there. And what do they all do? And how is the internet going to work? And I think none of us want the internet to collapse to be just a few sites. We want it to be open and diverse. And so, thinking that through, we came to the conclusion that we needed to do a fairly serious amount of work to try to create a new foundation for all of this. That's what we're calling Unified ID 2.0. It's an offshoot of what was called Project Rearc at the IAB. Papers had been written about this for years, basically saying like, hey, we're so dependent on the browsers. The browsers control everything. Shouldn't we have a solution that is separate from that? And if we did that, could we actually do a better job of explaining how it works to the consumer? Because my opinion is that a lot of the pressure that cookies are under is because it's hard to understand, it's hard to explain. Nobody understands it. That and the other problem with cookies is that everything happens implicitly. Data just moves. You don't have a lot of control over it. So looking at that, we came up with what I thought was a pretty good design. And then we just went and we started to really actively collaborate with everyone in the space to create an open source, collaborative solution that we can all use. And that's what UID2 is. So it's not just a matter of saying, like you could, hey, let's use email address for identity, which is what you're saying with that logged in internet where you give your email address to every single site and they take it and do whatever with it. Let's not do that. It's kind of my starting point with this. I think that's got a bunch of problems. And so there are some key principles that we put in place to try to make it so that the solution wasn't just our answer to cookie deprecation. It's actually like, how should the internet work? It's an upgrade that we're using hashing and encryption to create better security. It's just an upgrade in lots of different ways to make the internet function better. So the four ironclad principles of what we're doing here is it's secure and it's privacy friendly. It's absolutely consumer first. We're going to tell the consumers what's going to happen. We're going to ask them if it's okay. They're going to have the right to revoke that. It's going to be an honest conversation about the quid pro quo of the internet. Content's not free. I need to monetize it somehow. How do you want me to do it? And we'll just go ahead and have that conversation. We're finally going to do a great job of creating transparency, choice, and control for the consumer. So I had tried through the NAI and other efforts to create transparency, choice, and control with cookies. The cookies made it really, really hard to actually do that. So we had a whole system that we built for opting out of online advertising that tried to provide that control. A lot of that broke when Safari shipped their change, right? So it's like cookies were this fragile way to do what we wanted to do, which is just have that honest conversation and show the consumer, this is the data that's out there on you. If you're not comfortable with it, you take it away. It's yours. Third thing, open source and interoperable. We wanted to make sure that neither us nor anyone else tried to turn this into sort of a proprietary land grab, a way to lock down and tax the internet. We don't think the internet needs another tax. We think it's doing just fine without. And so, by being open source, by creating interoperability, we've been able to bring a lot of people in to collaborate that if anyone was trying to commercialize it, I think would have run to their corners and built their own solutions or whatever. And then we wouldn't have been able to create this kind of value for the consumer. And then the last thing is independent governance, along with the open source and community ethos. Like we have to have governance for this. You can't have an ID based on email addresses and just kind of do whatever with it. And we've had governance in ad tech that's been actually pretty effective. We've done well, but that's with your NAIs and your DAAs and all the ad choices icons, all the things we've done. We've worked hard to make it work, but we all are acknowledging that we need to level up our game when it comes to governance. So that means a strict code of conduct. That means you're going to be subject to audits, most likely, if you're dealing with this data. And I think it's just a really good thing to make sure that we continue to do the right thing for consumers. So it's going to let us do all kinds of cool new things, lots of things we've always wanted to do, like activate CRM data. It also creates this notion of interoperability that I love in all software. I love software that just works and works with other platforms and lets you plug things together, and where you create value, you win, right? Like that's the dream, I think, for all of us in the software world. So what this unified ID solution enables is lots of different login SSO providers, or different forms of interacting with the consumer that become currencies, along the lines of, like, you sign up for Shopify and you go through a little bit of a process once, and then you've got a currency that you can use over and over and over to log into lots of different websites. And we can make it, and SSO can make it, so that those websites don't actually get your email address, which is something that I think is pretty important. I would encourage consumers to choose an SSO where the publisher doesn't necessarily get your clear text email address and can't send you an email. So there's now a way for you to say, hey, I'm gonna trust this SSO to manage my internet experience, my authentication to lots of websites, with confidence that I'm not going to have an email box full of spam. And with confidence that there's a portal that I can go to go see how it's all going. Where's all the data? What's it all doing? If I want to take something away, I can. So really, really cool new capabilities that we're able to bring to market there. And then I think from a platform point of view, and this is maybe just advice for everyone who's I figure Aerospike's customers are mostly building platforms. I think a lot of this is going to need to be hidden from our customers, because everything keeps getting more and more complex for our customers, and so there's going to be this layered approach to figuring out what's going on the internet, because you're not going to have an email address based login 100% of the time, and even consumers who do opt in for a unified ID program are not going to do it on every website every time. And so there's going to be this traffic that you now have to understand in some other way. You know, it's very similar to what we've all done with probabilistic cross-device, where you've got a deterministic spine of data that lets you extrapolate into the rest of it. But we've all got a whole bunch of work to do to make this make sense for our customers. And like with the SCAD network, things are different in-app, right? Like in-app is a whole different universe. And actually the in-app thing is, the news is really positive lately, I think, on the IDFA change. So I really don't like what Apple did in their browser, where they said effectively, like, we're going to make this choice for you. We're going to take the cookie away. In app, they couldn't do that for a lot of economic reasons, but also I think they just maybe thought about it more and chose to instead say to the consumer, you choose. And let's let the app explain to you what's going to happen with this IDFA, and you can tell them whether or not they can use it. I think that's a really positive development. I think the early opt-in rates are very positive, showing that apps that can justify getting that IDFA, they're getting it, right? And like that's wonderful. And then apps that were maybe just sitting on the phone in the background collecting data, they're going to have a harder time getting that opt-in. It's all really, really good. It's all moving towards a consumer first, internet that functions, where content can be paid for, your privacy isn't violated. There's no tension between privacy and commercialization of the internet if you do it right. It's just a well-explained value exchange. So that's all going really well. So UID2 is going great. We're getting a tremendous amount of support across the ecosystem. We're working with all of the sort of industry trade bodies to finalize exactly where that independent governance is going to sit, and the conversations are great. And the code of conduct's getting drafted. Like we're making really fast progress, which is good. We need to keep going fast. If cookies actually do go away in 2022, no one wants to fall off a cliff and then have to come back, which pretty much happened the last time we went through this with GDPR. I think we had a deadline for the GDPR that was May 25th. I don't feel like I watched a lot of companies wake up on May 26th and say, what happened? And I don't think we can afford to do that as an industry or as an internet. So we need to be getting this all put together now, which is exactly what's happening. So the other thing to think about in all this is that consumers are leaning in. The consumers want to know, they want to have control. 81% of consumers say they would like to better understand what's happening. 54%, just in our little poll, said they would be more comfortable with their data being used if they knew how it was being used. Like just explain it to me. And then another 58% said they would be more comfortable if they had control. So there's transparency, there's control. Those are the things consumers care about. We've always known that's what consumers cared about, and so we just have to go build it. There's lots more metrics that our research is showing that says that consumers are ready for this. They're ready for the conversation, and it's time to deliver a product that works for them. So what does this mean for your tech stack? And so getting hopefully to the meat of it, since we're all here as builders of platforms. So this has a lot of implications for all of us. So first one is no more cookie mapping. That's amazing. I'm so happy. Unified ID 1.0, this is Unified ID 2.0. The 1.0 version was actually my first attempt to get rid of cookie mapping, because I was there when cookie mapping was kind of created at scale, and it always made me sad that was our answer, that in order to establish identity between browsers, we're going to do an end-to-end series of interconnects between them all. It's just really bad software engineering. It just offended me as an engineer. I always wondered what the carbon footprint of cookie mapping was. It was probably measurable. Like there was a lot of compute power going into something that just shouldn't have been happening. So from that point of view, some pressure gets taken off some of your Aerospike clusters from that angle. However, now there's multiple IDs. There's all these different universes. And so like there's going to be these different SSOs or different coalitions that get formed. There's going to be potentially complex rules, both commercial and regulatory, about how those IDs get used, where they get used. So, if some group of publishers bands together and says, we're going to have an SSO that's just for us, you have to make sure that's just for them and it's not going to get used to, help anyone else or whatever else they don't want to happen. There's going to be, particularly in Europe, but everywhere, I think, a lot of regulatory scrutiny that you have to deal with. So that's, I think, going to be a much more pressure on your Aerospike cluster to probably store more metadata, more versions of the same profile that are a little more separated. Like, you can't just kind of pool it all together in a master profile and then separate it out later. Again, get your own legal advice, but I think there's definitely complexity to deal with there. Similar to that, there's going to be an increased level of scrutiny and audit. And so if any of you haven't upped your game yet on SecOps, time is now. You're a little late. We all need to be, I think, better and better at security as time goes on. That's just a good thing. That's just going to drive maturity. There's a ton of new opportunities out there, and I think that's an important angle for everyone to look at. From your business, of course, there's pain associated with this that you have to go to, but then what's the opportunity for us? And for me, the most exciting opportunity is that connected television can now have an identity that, on an opt-in basis, when the consumer is comfortable with it, can be joined with their online data in a very, very clean way that can make it super effective. And that's also true of offline consumer data. So we'll be able to tie together viewership to sales for a CPG company, something they've never been able to do. They've always wanted to do it, and they've had to do it through panels and all these other things. You can do it directly now. So the opportunity is really, really big. And I suspect in a lot of industries, there are similar opportunities out there. Last thing, there's a fresh challenge to figure out what to do with the traffic that doesn't have an ID. Again, very industry dependent, but you'll have to apply AI rules, whatever it is. Are you doing extrapolations? And so I look at it kind of like turning cross-device inside out. So we did all this work to say, like, there's that cookie and 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 those 4 MIDs. And I think that's all kind of like the same person. That's all the probabilistic graph stuff we've done, which is really very effective, actually. And from a point of view of, like, should I buy that impression? Because if it's not you, they act a lot like you. It's really a great methodology for deciding to buy an impression or a chunk of media even. That technology is effective. That needs to get inverted effectively to say, like, I know perfectly what happened on this traffic over here. How am I going to make sense of what happens over here? And we're going to help our customers understand that. That's a very ad tech point of view, but I think that is also fairly universal. That what do I do with the rest of it is going to be a real thing. Maybe there's a flock on it, maybe there's not. Who knows on the rest of it? There's context, there's time of day, there's other features that you can look at in there. So I think 2021 will not be boring. Neither will 22. I think there's an abundance of entertaining big data challenges out there for us all to go solve. So wish everyone luck. And back to you, Bill.
Dave, thank you for your time and preparing such a thoughtful presentation. As the marketing guy at Aerospike, it was extremely pertinent to what I do. And as I've said to you recently, we are a very happy Trade Desk customer. So I was following along closely. In fact, I asked my advertising agency, who is a partner of yours, to join and learn, because they're still trying to figure this out as all of us are. So thank you. You made a comment early on about content. We all kind of understand that content isn't free, although we've kind of come to expect that it's free. I was at the Gartner Data and Analytics Conference a couple of years ago, where they did a survey, different than yours, about how consumers felt about giving up their private information. And what they found out was people were perfectly comfortable in exchange for valuable information. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind, that people are willing to give up their information if what they're getting in exchange they feel is worth giving the information up for. So I think you provided some good thoughts for that. Unified ID 2.0, so that means it's not 1.0, you've learned a lot, but it's an open source community in what you talked about. How do people join? And then there must be some terrific contribution to that community that's evolving that, because there is a lot of complexity. As you talked about, you're unifying information across a lot of different sources now and getting away from sort of the browsers. And I'm just kind of curious, is there a couple of things that have come up from the community that might give people some inspiration to join the community and chip in?
Yeah, I mean, so Unified ID 2 grew out of something called Project Rearc. There was an IAB Tech Lab project. So, it's kind of started out in the self-regulatory community, saying, us brainstorming, like, what's a better way to do it than cookies? Because, like you said, most consumers are totally fine to talk about a quid pro quo of data for content. What they don't like is being confused and having things happen behind the scenes implicitly that they don't understand. It's really that lack of understanding that consumers don't like. And so Rearc was, hey, why don't we just go out and tell people what's happening, and then collect an ID and explain it and create transparency. And so a lot of the contributions to this have actually been going on over the last 10 years. All the things that we tried to do with all the self-regulatory boards like the NAI to create opt-outs and all of that, we did the best we could with cookies, but cookies going away has sort of been like a opportunity. Really, the cookies going away in Chrome is the signal that, hey, it's time to go do that reinvention. And so I think everyone's coming to the table with, yeah, I always wanted to do it the right way, because I think we'll really win if we do it the right way. And so, mostly what's happening now is we're getting the encryption right. We're, making sure all the security is right, making sure that the consumer is, properly informed. And so there's all kinds of ways to contribute, whether you're great at UX and you want to like work on the wording of exactly what we're saying to consumers, making sure it's really crisp and really accurate, or if you want to talk about threat assessment and you want to start making sure that it's truly secure. I think it's pretty buttoned up, but anybody who wants to attack it and try to break it is more than welcome. So there's a really diverse set of ways to do it, and anyone who wants to can do it. I think through the IAB Tech Lab, that's a pretty inclusive group at this point that most people should know how to get in touch with.
Terrific, great. You made a reference many times to SSO, and as an old security software guy, I know what that means. It struck me that with all the attempts on SSO, there's still a lot of people who don't actually use it. A lot of companies don't use it. If you haven't used it through a company as a consumer, I have a password vault with I don't know how many passwords in it, which is a massive. I long for the day of having my own SSO for all of those websites. But what is any reaction to that? Any sort of feedback on how that gets adopted? Because it strikes me that that's something we all would love to be able to do, but we still suffer with, hey, honey, do you remember the password to such and such site? So I'm just curious about your thinking or experience on getting people to adopt that, because it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make it easier or harder with an SSO, and some SSOs are very easy to adopt. There's a bunch of them out there. Others are more high friction. Inside Trade Desk, we have an SSO for everything that we do on our corporate platform, and I think people are so relieved because the security has to be really, really high on all those environments, and so you are required to use a different password, and you're required to change it all the time. Yep. And so when things get a little harder to deal with, I think that's when most people look to a tool. And so then when you look at the open internet, if you think about every website on the internet having a wall of some kind, a paywall, an authentication wall, I think there's going to be a lot of incentive for people to sign up for one or more single sign-on products. And there doesn't have to just be one. There can be many, just like there's Visa and MasterCard, right? You can have multiple currencies that are used to help you get access to the things that you want.
So we have a technical audience here. People are thinking about, man, what does this mean to my infrastructure? What does this mean to my cluster design? What does this mean to how I structure my data models? You made comments about different ways to think about that. Is there just one key takeaway or two key takeaways for people who are thinking about how do I go deal with this literally from a development perspective?
I think it's the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? So I suspect your customers are pretty good at engineering. And so I think from that point of view, I think it validates a lot of what we've done, where we put a system into place that has a ton of flexibility, where we can create new application layers that wrap around the database to do all kinds of things. And so, identity is not going away. It is changing. I think, like I said in the presentation, the bar is going to raise on SecOps. So let's all get better at SecOps. It'll be good anyway, because when you all go public, you'll need to get good anyway. So if you aren't already, I think that's the two big ones.
Well, thanks. We're out of time, Dave. Thank you again for your remarks today and for answering a couple of questions. And I'll let everybody get back to the rest of the day. Thank you for your time.